Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Scarborough, Agincourt.
Speaker. Madam Speaker, one has to sort of look back in our history and examine the people that have come to this country, people that have immigrated, people that have come on ships seeking refuge. And there are some examples that this country might not be very proud about. One of them was the Gatamagatamuru, and the other one was the Spirit of St. Louis. And both those examples, people were turned back. They were not even allowed to come to our shores. And years later, governments apologized for what happened. But I cannot forget, back in the mid-'80s, there was a ship that came from India, a ship full of Punjabis. And as soon as it arrived on our shores, I believe it was July of 1987, the then Conservative government, headlines, we've been invaded. Headlines, they're arriving. Let's get away with them. Let's do away with them. And this House, if I remember correctly, was brought back in the middle of the summer in order to discuss that. Madam Speaker, I had the opportunity and the pleasure of meeting some of those people 25 years later, 24, 23 years later, and seeing them to be productive citizens, seeing them to have their families, and seeing them that they've gone on and they're truly Canadians. And some of them even dwelled in politics. And it brings us to today's situation we have, Bill C-4. And it seems that the Tamils are invading, the Tamils are coming, and it's the Tamils, the Tamils, the Tamils. So let's examine why is this Conservative government raising the flag that the Tamils are coming, why are the headlines that we've been invaded by the Tamils, and why we're here where we're today. The Tamil community certainly feels it's been targeted. The Tamil community, I remember as far as when Stockwell Day was the leader of this party, that he sort of with a brush, and he went on to say that most of the Tamils are terrorists. I remember children in my schools in my area, where I have a large Tamil population, they were scared that, you know, if they go to school, they'd be called Tamils, and there were incidents where young ones were called terrorists, and matter of fact, were being abused by other children. And this went on and on and on over the years, and I do remember in the election, the winter election of 2005-2006, the Conservative Party then, and the minister today, got up and he said that we're going to brush them and we're going to classify them as terrorists. Instead of taking a look and saying, okay, there's a problem in Sri Lanka, there's a civil war in Sri Lanka, what can this government do to intervene, and what can this government do to find a solution? Certainly that was not the issue. Certainly the issue was, let's help Sri Lanka and the government of Sri Lanka, mostly Sinhalese, in order to alienate the Tamils. And Madam Speaker, that occurred. And the Tamil community rose and came outside on the Hill and said, we want intervention, we want our government to speak, and nobody listened. We, the Liberals, also turned a blind eye to it. And it was everybody's fault for not listening to the results that occurred after the termination of that civil war. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of people were interned in Sri Lanka. There were horror stories of combatants that were executed. There is a Channel 4 video that it shows the government of Sri Lanka executing combatants that were arrested. There were stories that women were raped, children were separated from their parents, and the story goes on and on and on. Even to this day, the Tamil community, not only in Canada, but around the world, is calling for justice. And some of those people that were going through that hardship decided, enough is enough, I'm going to go and find a better life. I'm going to go and seek refuge. Some people, Madam Speaker, when they come to Canada, find different means. They go from country to country to country, and they come in here with illegal passports, and they arrive at our shores and say, I'm seeking refuge. Well, these people decided, like the people of Gatamagatamuru, back in the 1910s, that I'm going to get on a boat, and I'm going to go to Canada. So we had two boats. One in 2009, the Ocean Lady, with 76 Tamils, and then in 2010, the Sun Sea, with 492 Tamils. Well, we've been invaded. We have 568 people that have come to our shores, and we've been invaded, and there's more boats. And they decided back then, we're going to bring a piece of legislation in that was draconian. Well, Madam Speaker, they didn't have the numbers then, they have the numbers now. And now they're saying, we're going to go ahead with it, we're not going to listen. We're going to go ahead with it, we're going to steamroll it right through And we're also going to use this as a tool to fundraise. Madam Speaker, if in your constituency and in many of our constituency, you'll see the ads that were played during the election and you see the outreach that the Conservative Party is doing. They're using these two votes and this draconian bill in order to put a wedge right between the communities and a wedge between different ethnicities that are in this Canada, and going back to the reform base and say, give us money in order for us to fight the war. What war? 560 people that arrive in our shores? That's a war? And then now we're coming up with a bill that died last year. And we're saying to these people, if you come to Canada and the minister decides, we're going to arrest you for a year, and then you cannot apply to land until 5 years later. Now, Madam Speaker, in a good day, somebody that comes to this country and seeks refuge, and after she or he has their hearing, that can take anywhere between 9 months to a year, and maybe a little shorter, and then they have to apply in order to land. And that process is a humanitarian and compassionate process. So they put their paperwork in, and off it goes to the case processing center in Vegreville. And it just sits there, and it sits there. And if you're lucky, and if you're really, really lucky, in 4, maybe 5 years, you get called in order to land. And at that time, if it's a concurrent application, which means you and your family are simultaneously being applied through, you land, your family comes over. So, as we have it right now, we're separating refugees that come to our shores anywhere between 4 to 5 years. So somebody comes on a boat, and you cannot apply until 5 years later. And maybe, in those 5 years, if the situation back in your country has changed, we'll send you back. So let's look at this map. 1939, the Spirit of St. Louis came over, full of full of people that were seeking refuge from Hitler, Jews, and they arrived. Well, we might have kept them here for 5 years. 1945 rolls over. Well, things changed in Europe. Let's send you back. Where's the sense? Where's the sense in all of this? When people are coming over, they have to be looked at the time that they arrive, the conditions in their country at the time they arrive. But going back, Madam Speaker, to those people, let's talk specifically about the 492 and the 76. If this law was in process, they would not have been allowed to apply for landing until 5 years were on. 5 years plus another 4 to 5 years before you get landed. That's 10 years. So a mother comes over and separates herself from her children because she might have lost her husband. The kids are 5 years old, and she's stranded. She doesn't see her children for 10 years. So a 5-year-old is left behind. He doesn't see his mother until he's 15. He grows up without a mother. He grows without a parent. And when that person turns 15, and if they're really lucky, and the minister hasn't changed her mind, they might come to Canada. This is the draconian bill that this Conservative government is bringing in. Now, Madam Speaker, a couple of years ago, we had an Inspector General from UNHCR, Mr. Arnold Akwendenju. And he was here speaking to the Citizenship and Immigration Committee, and we asked him, how was Canada reaching out to UNHCR and saying, can you supply us, people's credentials and information if they're really refugees or not? And I asked him the question, has Canada reached out? The answer back was that, well, we haven't had anything from Canada. What Canada was doing, and what Canada is doing under this Conservative government, is going back to Sri Lanka and is saying to the government of Sri Lanka, are these people legitimate refugees? So here you got somebody which is fleeing a situation, coming back to Canada, and instead of going to the UNHCR and the inspectors in order to ask them, what do? You send information back to Sri Lanka. So if these people were to be deported, these people would be the first ones to be hurt. Now, when Sun Lady came in 2010, there was an article, and it reads as following. The UNHCR supports the important work of law enforcement agencies in combating human smuggling. And it goes on. It is nonetheless important to recognize that while refugees are a distinct group with critical protection needs, it is not a crime to seek asylum, said Mr. Mahechik of the UNHCR. He continued, although the war has ended, the UNHCR says Tamils might still have legitimate reasons for seeking asylum. Tamils, I repeat that, still have legitimate reasons for seeking asylum. Madam Speaker, this thing that we're debating today is we're putting the Tamil community at risk. Madam Speaker, this is not only in Bill C-4.
Order, please. Order. Order. The honourable member's time has elapsed. He may be able to elaborate in the questions and comments. Questions et commentaires?
Questions and comments.
The questions and comments. The honourable member for Bonavista Vista, Gander, Grand Falls, Windsor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the enthusiasm of my colleagues to get me on my feet as well, as it were. I also want to commend my colleague here, who sits in front of me, for all the work that he's done on immigration, certainly in his writing on the ground level. So I want to ask him, because part of the debate that's been going on here, a large part of the debate is, and the term that's been bandied about has been queue jumping, and queue jumping takes effect in the immigration system. Now, when it comes to the issue of refugees, it's a concept that is not as tangible, we'll say, regarding refugees, and I want him to comment on that. Plus, if he could also make reference to what the Supreme Court decision would impose in this particular situation from this legislation pending.
Honourable member for Scarborough, Adjunct.
Sure. Certainly, Madam Speaker, the people that come to Canada to seek refuge, I don't consider them queue jumpers. There's a lot of people that have come to this country in order to do this, and there's a lot of people that are in this House that have come to Canada to seek refuge. But I want to thank my colleague from Newfoundland for his question. He says about queue jumping. So let's examine queue jumping out of Sri Lanka. These are spousal cases, people that are sponsoring their wives. I've got a couple of files here, Madam Speaker, that I want to bring to the attention of this House. File was opened in my office September 17, 2010. Today, we received an announcement that says, please be advised that this application has passed on paper screening stage and is presently in queue for review. Second one, March 11, 2011. To this day, it's still in process. January 2011, today, we're paper screening. October 18th, 2010. Please be informed, and this is today, that this file has been paper screened and it's in queue to be reviewed by an officer. Madam Speaker, these are examples of people sponsoring their families, their wives and their husbands, and they're all from Sri Lanka. And according to the minister's website, it takes 2 months in the case processing center in Mississauga, and after it goes to Sri Lanka, and it's supposed to be 13 months. 15 months. Madam Speaker, these figures speak for themselves. This is not 15 months. It goes on. So if anybody from the Conservative Party were to stand up and say that they don't think they're targeting the Tamil community, I got news for you. When this bill came in, C-4, they didn't even have the audacity, not even the audacity, they didn't even have the kindness to reach out to the Canadian Tamil Congress.
Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. Questions et commentaires.
Questions and comments.
The honourable member for Burnaby and Westminster.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I appreciated the speech from my colleague. He did point out the danger inherent in other aspects of how this government approaches the human rights violations that continue to go on in Sri Lanka. So I wanted to ask him what he thought the Canadian government should be doing to stop what are significant, systemic, and ongoing human rights violations taking place in northern Sri Lanka.
The honourable member has 1 minute to respond.
Madam Speaker, before this bill came into power, the responsibility of a sound government, the responsibility of this government was to reach out to the Tamil community and say, let us work with you. Reach out to the stakeholders. Madam Speaker, just this afternoon, I got off the phone with the Canadian Tamil Congress and the National Congress of Canadian Tamils that represents 250,000 Tamils in this country. They don't know which person has called them. Oh, no, I'm sorry. The Conservative government has lost their phone number and their coordinates in order to call them. They haven't called them. They should be ashamed of themselves. If you're going to bring any bill in, any legislation, you've got to go to your stakeholders. No stakeholders. Nobody was consulted. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Reprise du débat, l'honorable.